Welcome to the With You and For You podcast. Our desire is to equip college-age students within the Edmond, OKC area by discussing topics and questions that are relevant to our generation. With that in mind, thank you for tuning in, and let's get to the show. What's up, everybody? How's it going? We're back with the squad. We got Krista Smith. Hey, I said your name right this time. Tyson Hill and Kyle Thomas.
Krista Hope is also.
Well, that
right.
That is your name.
Yeah, that is my name.
I don't call her Krista Smith. I say Krista Hope.
Really? You do?
100%.
I'm a big calling people by their first and middle name.
Krista Hope in
Really?
a long time.
Yeah.
Tyson, do you
That's
know
what
my
my mom
middle
calls
name?
me when she's mad at me.
I don't.
Is it like Scott?
No, that's not my middle name.
I don't know. What is it?
It's Keith.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My dad was
Riley
big
Keith.
on calling us by our initials. So
Oh.
just
What?
first and middle initial.
First and
KJ?
Mm-hmm.
So that's your Christian rap name, huh?
That's right.
there is a Christian
That's
rapper,
what I'm
and his name is
talking
KJ52.
Oh, yeah.
KJ52's fire, dude.
Yes!
I
Oh
love
my
KJ52.
Okay. Me and my mom were actually talking about him the other day because we used to listen to him.
He's really old.
He
been
is.
out for a while.
Yeah, but he's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's really good
really
too.
old.
Kind of like Kyle. Kyle's pretty old too.
Kyle's not that old, guys.
He's not that old, actually. Sorry.
Kyle's
was
older
just kind of
than
mean.
Riley, how old are you?
I'm 21.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Perfect.
How old do you think I was?
I would have thought you were 19 for a second, and I knew that was
19?
so wrong.
What?
Yeah, I was 19.
What?
Gavin's 19.
Yeah.
I told someone I was 22 this week.
Gavin's a
and
baby.
Came back like 10
In
minutes
case you're
later. I was
wondering,
like, I'm sorry,
Gavin's
I'm
the one that's
23.
off screen.
You're 20. Oh, no.
Yeah,
I
I
knew
totally
that.
forgot.
I
Yeah,
did-
see?
I knew
Yeah,
that.
see? You know what
I
I'm
knew
We
saying?
need to get Gavin a microphone sometimes.
Sometimes
Yes.
We could.
Yes, off
Make it
camera
happen.
mic. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
That's right.
Yeah.
We'd have to set up a
Props to
little,
Gavin.
a little camera
Props
for
to
him,
Gavin doing the Lord's work.
Yeah.
Mhm. Heck yeah.
Making
Gavin.
sure things do things.
I would turn the camera around, but that'd break the illusion that this room is all black.
No, we can't feel too No behind the scenes here.
It's not allowed. Yeah, so.
Get those
What?
off of there.
Why are you doing
Get him
that?
out of here.
We can't have those on there.
Yeah, come on now.
We're not sponsored by them.
I know. It was my snack.
You don't get a snack right now?
I don't get a snack right
You'll be
now.
fine.
I'm kind of hungry.
You can make it 48 minutes without eating.
Tyson, I'm so hungry.
I don't think yogurt-covered raisins are going to fill you up, Riley.
Well, I just
Only
need
the
some-
Lord can satiate you.
Ah,
gosh.
that's
Yeah,
good.
that
you
was
need
good.
You need that
Yeah.
spiritual bread.
You got 48 minutes of fasting. You'll be all right.
But I've been cutting, and
Actually,
it hurts.
Pray about it.
And-
I've been
okay.
cutting.
That's
You got to put context on it. I've been
Cutting weight.
okay. Sorry, cutting weight. Cutting weight. I haven't been eating as much food.
Don't worry, I'm probably going to try to cut some of this out. So.
Riley, what are we talking about today?
Okay.
Riley doesn't even know.
I don't know.
Guys, it's Riley's favorite topic.
Oh,
Yeah, it is.
He's now the spokesperson for
singleness.
Singleness.
I'm so excited. Yeah, so we're talking about singleness today, and Krista was the ex pro at this, but she recently got engaged.
I did.
So good for her. Good for her.
chill. It's not that serious. Calm
Riley's really
down.
excited about it. Man.
It's okay. Riley's in full support of me and Micah's relationship.
I am.
I could tell in that comment.
I am. I am. I love you guys both. You guys are awesome. So singleness is something that is oftentimes seen as a negative thing, especially within our culture, especially within like our Christian culture. And the first question that I kind of have for you guys is, why is it seen as a negative thing?
I think I think a lot of people just think like the main goal in life is just to get married. And so when you're not, it can be seen as, a negative thing. And I think a lot of people just put a lot of emphasis on it in the sense of, hey, my goal in life is to graduate college, get married, have a family, have my career, and die. That's it. But within all of that, in order to, have a family and do those things, some of those things, you have to be married in order to do those things. And I think a lot of people think that there's satisfaction that only comes from being married or, having a family. So they find a lot of they find like just a pursuit of wanting to be married in such a way that then if they're not, then it's seen as a negative thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you guys on this.
Oh, okay.
Because I think we're looking at singleness as a negative thing within our small circle of influence, where if you were to step outside of Oklahoma, maybe you step outside of like the Midwest, you would see people that are like, hey, I'm completely content and not getting married until I'm in my 30s. Or, you know, whenever that kind of happens. Now, worldly, like, if you look at it, it's probably more of, hey, I'm still going to kind of do the things that I would do, like, if I was married, but I'm not married. So I'm not necessarily committed to this person. But my wife, she studied abroad with some friends that she met, like, and they're from New York. And it's like they just started getting married in the last couple of years in their early 30s and everything. And so I think when we look at singleness, there are some people that look at it as a negative thing, and then there are some people that, I mean, they don't view it like that. It's just kind of like, oh, well, why rush to get married? Like I have all this time to do this stuff. I mean, and so I think it's kind of one of those where it really isn't necessarily as, I don't know, like narrow, like, yes, like we all view it as negative if we're single, or hey, they all view it as negative, because depending on where you're at, just in the world, can depend on how people view marriage and singleness.
Yeah, I don't mean to like sound weird because I didn't get married when I was 22, but I was very content in being single, and then just boop, wife. But like, I think like, okay, like Kyle said, like very content and like doing the stuff on my own, if need be. And so like, I think that there are some people in our culture who are content in being single and see the importance of it. I think that it is a topic for our audience specifically. There are a lot of people who eagerly desire a relationship, though, whether that's healthy or not.
Yeah, I would definitely say like the negative thing of singleness is for those that, hey, I am incomplete if I am single, to where those are the people that, hey, if you have those feelings, you probably shouldn't be dating. Like, you're not in a right place to be dating somebody, because you're using that person to complete you when that role is for Christ.
Yeah. So kind of a transition off of that has some like really to do with that. With our culture and like this Christian culture that we're in, especially like what you were saying, Kyle, within like this Midwest society, have we made marriage more than just a desire? Have we made it more of an idol? Like, is it turning into that for some people, would you say?
I think it depends. Obviously, it depends on the individual, depends on the couple. Like, I think it's one of those when if you look in Scripture, I mean, obviously, like the Old Testament, like there were a lot of people that weren't necessarily pursuing kind of how God had created His intended order, right? It's like, hey, you have a wife, and now you have multiple wives, and now you have concubines, like, but that was never God's like intent in creation. I mean, when He created Adam, then I mean, woman was created, Adam and Eve were created, and so we see this kind of idea of marriage, like between one man, one woman. And then we kind of, you get into the Old Testament where it's now becoming distorted, and you see these kings taking on multiple wives. You look at Solomon. Like, Solomon had wisdom, but dude had so many things that were just like taking away his attention from even, I mean, pursuing the Lord. To where I think there can be like idolatry in it. But it's also one of those, like, our culture is kind of like, what's an acceptable age to get married, right? For us, like, we may say, oh, well, hey, once you're done with college, like, that's usually a good time. It's kind of a natural order of things, right? Like, oh, college and then this and that. But that may not be the case, right? You may meet somebody that it's like, hey, I'm ready to marry this person. Like, I'm ready to spend the rest of my life with them. Why do I have to wait until I'm 22, 23, 24 to do that? And the answer is you don't, right? But society tells us kind of in our society, like, oh, well, you should just to make sure, you know? And I think that's where like the door can be opened more towards sins and struggles and just kind of continuing to push that line of temptation to where I think, again, if you're in a relationship, don't allow other relationships you see, that people getting engaged, people getting ready to get married, and maybe they've been dating for a shorter time than you have in your relationship. Don't allow those things to pressure you into getting engaged and saying, well, we have to be next, like, because we've been dating longer than these people, like, it's our turn. No, like, there's nothing that says your timeline has to be their timeline. And there's nothing that says, oh, well, hey, like, we have to rush this or we don't have to rush it. Like, your relationship is between you, that other person, and the Lord. And I think being intentional in that really helps to make marriage, I mean, hey, this is our walk with life. Like, we're not looking at this thing as an idol to where it brings completion. I mean, there is part of it, like, obviously, like, in marrying that person, it's like, hey, we are now becoming one. And it is going to be something that glorifies and honors the Lord, hopefully. Like, that's the goal. But be content in your singleness, because I think it will really help you appreciate when you are married, if you are married, if you get married, right? So,
No, I get that. So, oh wait, Krista,
Well,
were
were you
you
going
gonna
to
say
say
something?
something? I felt, okay. Is
Go
it
ahead,
okay?
go,
I'm
go,
going.
go.
Okay. I think sometimes, and just like sometimes like in talking to girls just over the years and things like that, sometimes I think that we desire marriage because we think that's when like our life begins or like we've made it. But I think kind of like what Kyle was just talking about in the sense of, I think in order to, desire marriage for the right things, you have to understand the purpose of marriage. And it's like a display of the gospel. And obviously, like, yes, like, I'm not married yet. I'm like moving towards that. But in conversations me and Micah have had, a lot of our conversations has been like, hey, we want our marriage to be a display of the gospel. And because we both have that desire, like, that's why we desire marriage in that way. I'm not marrying Micah because I'm like, oh, like, this is going to make my mom happy because I'm married or whatever. Like, that's not, like, the point of it. Like, I, like, want my marriage to be a reflection of the gospel. And so I think in your singleness, you can use that time to understand, hey, what is the gospel and what even does the Bible say about marriage? And I think not becoming, like, obsessed with, okay, what does the Bible say on marriage? Like, I want to know everything about it. But just knowing, like, hey, I understand that the Bible talks about marriage is used to display the gospel, so I want to know and have a deeper understanding of what the gospel is, so that, Lord willing, if you do get married one day, your desire for marriage is to be a display of the gospel because you spent your singleness making that foundation just the basis of the gospel and everything you say and do.
I think that, like, when it comes to, like, marriage and, like, idealizing it, I think, like, if if we keep it with what it's supposed to be, so, like, a perfect picture or a picture of Jesus' relationship with us and the gospel and stuff like that, then, like, if we're maintaining that, then we're holding that true. And so, like, if we're maintaining that view of it, then it's not an idol. But it becomes an idol whenever we look at it as the end of, like, a goal, right? And so when we look at marriage as like, oh, like, well, when I get married, now I'm a complete person. When I get married, I get to start living. When I get married, I'll have all the stuff that I need. That's whenever it's like, okay, like, we're idealizing it. And you're going to be in for a rude awakening when you get married. And the next day you're like, oh, well, let's go have fun on our honeymoon now. We're married.
we're married.
Yeah, but I think that's like I think the one thing to understand too is that it is something that is good and lawful within the sight of God to get married. And so with that, like, our flesh and the enemy is going to skew it off the mark a little bit to make it something that we focus on more than God. And so especially like in the Christian culture, like marriage is something that is beautiful and should be like held within that. But if we can just skew the viewpoint a little bit, then we've caused a lot of damage. Mm-hmm. And so like we're all really close to what marriage should be, but we're not directly on the path. And so I think that like the enemy in our flesh uses that opportunity to like, okay, well, I'm just going to make you idealize it a lot. And then you're going to be too focused on that and not focused on like loving the Lord with all your heart, mind, strength, and soul. You're going to be more focused on, well, who's the boy, who's the girl that's next for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one thing, I mean, just as you were talking, like, if we look at marriage as something that will bring deliverance, then it's an idol. Mm-hmm. So if you are somebody that you're looking at marriage like, oh man, once I'm married, like I'm not going to struggle with this sexual sin. I'm not going to struggle with this lust anymore because I'll be able to sleep with my spouse. Like, that's not how it works. Or if you look at it like, oh man, once I'm married, like I'll be able to have consistent quiet times. I'll be a better believer. Like I'll follow the Lord closer. You know, like I'm not saying that you know, like there isn't some like, oh hey, maybe that's, you know, can change that, but don't wait for that because it's not going to happen. Like obviously, I think the Lord can work in that, and He can convict you of your sins and be like, oh, radical change and all that kind of stuff. But if you're not doing these things, kind of like if you're not spending time in the Word before you go on mission, like, and then you're like, oh well, once I go on mission, like then I'll spend a lot of time in the Word. Like, okay, that may not be sustainable because then it's like, oh, the mission trip's over, and I'm going to come back to my old life and just do the old thing, like, right? And so in the same way with marriage, like don't look at marriage as this deliverance from these sins or these struggles that you have. Like you need to start dealing with those things now so that you can be a better godly husband, godly wife. Like, so you're not bringing in, and I mean, people will bring in, I mean, baggage and different things, but like if there are things that you are knowingly like struggling with and everything, being like, hey, like, I want to make sure that I'm on the right path. Like I have accountability in this. Like I'm seeking discipleship in these things. Like I'm trending in the right direction before I get married, so that I'm not bringing these things in. Like because obviously we're not perfect in getting married. Like we're all sinners. So you're marrying another sinner. Like we're going to struggle with those things. But I just think we really have to be careful and understanding. Like, hey, if I'm married, like I will be delivered from the struggles and sins that I'm currently wrestling with or going through. So, yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about desiring marriage for the wrong reasons and the negative things about that and almost making it an idol. But how do we desire singleness, and how do we make it and change our mindset into more of a positive thing instead of thinking about it in a negative sense?
Yeah. I mean, Psalm 119, how can a young man keep his way pure? By keeping it according to your word. Like, I think, how do we look at singleness as this positive is you double down on your walk with the Lord. Like, you focus on it. You're strategic in it. Your schedule is intentional in pursuing Christ over everything else. Like, I remember, and just before I started dating Nikki, she had just gotten out of a relationship, kind of a long, like 3-year relationship, handful of months prior to that, maybe, I don't really know. But like she just got out of that relationship, and she's kind of had this freak out moment because you think college is, hey, these young adult years are great opportunities where I can meet somebody, Lord willing, we can get married, and especially as ladies, like they can struggle with this. Like, well, if I don't meet that person or get married in college, like
it'll never happen.
it could never happen, right? That percentage could go way down. And it cracks me up because Nikki, she's like, I had this freak out moment, and I was just like, Lord, all right, like I vented all this kind of stuff. Like I'll give you until I'm 30, and then I'll have another freak out moment, right? like she put it like a time on it. Like, hey, I'll give you till I'm 30, and then I'll have another freak out moment if I'm still single by then. And I think it's just kind of one of those, like, it's okay to have those freak out moments and just kind of be spending time in prayer to the Lord, be like, God, like I'm freaking out because I desire to be married. Like I want to be married, but here I am. post-graduation, single, don't know if there are any prospects out there. Like, and I think it can be hard for ladies, especially if you're like, I don't want to, like, maybe be that one that goes and asks the guy out. Like, I want the guy to ask me out, which I think is fine. The guys need to step up anyway. Guys can be pretty passive.
Yeah.
Not that
I was
ladies.
gonna say facts, but then I was like, well, my kid did do that. He did really good. So.
Yeah. But
But
I'm not
there are
saying
some
that
guys that-
I've
yeah.
people have talked to
Not
me where
you, sorry.
Why'd you look at me?
Yeah,
Why did,
I
why did
did
you?
not
Why did you look at me?
and I mean, I've
doing great.
talked to people where they're like, yeah, like the girls kind of like, I kind of like nudged the guy a little bit because he was being too shy or too nervous or whatever. And I'm like, hey, that's cool. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's one of those to where like we have those freak out moments, but then understand, hey, God is still sustainer. Like, God is still provider. Do I trust him in my singleness or not? Or am I bringing these stipulations to the table saying, God, I'll trust you if you do these things? And so singleness is a positive. You have freedom to do a lot of things for the Lord that you won't have when you're married. When you get married, you now have another person that it's not a have to, it's a should. Like, I should, hey, here's my schedule this week. Here's what I have going on. It's going to be kind of busy. Hey, but I want to spend time with you too. Like, do you want to come with me to BCM on Thursday night? Do you want to come with me to this thing that I have going on? Do you want to, I want to include you in that. Or, hey, my friends are hitting me up saying, hey, you guys want to hang out Saturday, go watch a movie. Like, I want to, and I think I don't want to go too far off into the soapbox, but it's not one of those to where I constantly am going up to Nikki being like, hey, so can I go hang out with my friends? To where I'm putting her in this position to make her the bad guy, right? And then be like, sorry guys, Nikki said I can't. Like, that's not fair to her. I need to be diligent and being like, hey guys, the last couple of weeks have been super busy. I can't do it. And not even bring it to her, because then it's unfair to her. And so like working through that thing to being diligent and like, hey, you know what? Like, I need to step up and just, nope, I can't do it, guys. I want to, but I can't. It just doesn't work out. And the same vice versa. But if we start to bring those stipulations to the Lord, then obviously we're going to look at singleness as a negative. And we're going to, I think a lot of us, we could miss the opportunities that God had for us in that time of singleness because we were so focused on wanting to be married. So focused on, a lot of us, I think it's like the benefits of being married. Well, what are the benefits? Not just, and I mean, in our culture, it's usually we focus on the physical. I get to have sex. Like, yes, guilt-free sex. Sign me up for that. Can't wait. And we focus on that to where it's like, I want to rush to get married to where that's a thing. And again, beautiful thing. God intended it that way, 100%. But it's one of those to where it's like, okay, again, it kind of goes back to like, am I looking at marriage for deliverance? Am I looking at it to bring this kind of fullness where that place should be for the Lord in our lives?
I'm sorry.
You
did
already
you
started. Go.
Well,
Continue to talk.
I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I also think a way that we can make it not positive is focusing on it in the sense of like, okay, I'm going to do all these things for the Lord and then he's going to bless me with a spouse. And I think sometimes we fall into that and we're like, okay, I'm going to work on scripture memory and have a quiet time every single day and be really consistent in that, with the, like, in the back of your mind being like, if I do these things, the Lord will bless me with a spouse. And that's just not true. But I think a way to think of it in a positive way is, one, understanding that we are all born single. And we have this thing that the Lord has given us called time. And it's this time to just spend with him. I mean, I didn't know that, when I moved to Edmond and all of these things, like, even during college, like, I didn't know that I would move here and meet Micah and be married by the end of this year. Like, I didn't know those things. And I wasn't focusing on those things. Like, my time in college and my time even just, like, in high school, I just was like, okay, I have this time that I can give to the Lord, and I can cultivate my heart for the nations. I can grow in my walk with the Lord so that one day, I knew, like, whenever I was in college, I was like, hey, like, I do want to be married, and Kyle kind of talked about it, but I knew that I wanted to be married, and I was like, hey, I can work on my relationship with the Lord. So if one day I do get married, like I can be a godly wife and I can grow in that. And I think just understanding like, hey, I have this time to, yes, like grow in the Lord and grow in these things so that I can be a godly spouse one day. But also I have this time just to do things for the Lord in the sense of I can go on mission. I can do all of these things and I don't have to consider anybody else's feelings. Like I could just pack up and go overseas, or I mean, even moving here to Edmond, I didn't have to consider anyone's feelings of, hey, I want to be a sport-raised missionary, and I want to go work among college students. Like I told my parents that's what I was doing. Like I didn't ask them if they were okay with it. Like I didn't have to do those things. And I mean, so I think just understanding that, hey, we're all born single, and we're all born with the time to fully devote to the Lord. And not waste it.
And I'm gonna start by saying this. I'm gonna say this as many times as I can until it gets through everyone's head. You are single until you're married. Mm-hmm. Let's get that straight. That until you have done the thing before you're friends in God and become married, you are single. So whether you're dating someone or engaged, you are single. All right. I need everyone to understand that. Okay, so
the thing is the marriage, the vows.
That's what changes the door.
Thing.
So just because you're dating someone, just because you're engaged, does not change anything. Okay, and I just want to say that just because all this stuff, like some people may just tune it off because they're dating someone. It's like no, you're still single. But also one thing that I think we don't talk about enough. And I think it's just because it's an oversight, is that, like, when you get married, you're going to spend some time grieving your singleness. Like, when you get married, you're going to spend some time, like, adjusting to the change.
That's good.
And, like, we don't really talk about that. And I think it's just because we don't, like, see it that way. So, like, cherish your singleness because when you get married, it's going to change.
Yeah. It's like those that, if you've lived by yourself and you haven't had a roommate, you had the freedom to kind of do the things you wanted to do, clean the dishes when you wanted to clean the dishes, vacuum when you wanted to, and then you get a roommate and you're like, oh, like there's somebody else, like, then we have to work around like these things and, communicate like, and so, but marriage is, and it's a good thing. Like you're grieving your singleness, but you're working through it with somebody that hopefully you love and like want to spend the rest of your life with. And so there is like the good thing in it, but yeah, Tyson, you're right. Like it's something to where you're like, oh, I can't just hop in the car and drive off and go get McDonald's, at 2 a.m. Like, maybe I could, but Nikki might freak out a little bit, so that's a good point.
There's still a sense of why not, but it's just, you got to consider one other person.
That's right.
Because, if me and my wife, we don't have any kids, but if we want to go to Taco Bell at 2 a.m., if we agree to it, let's go.
Why not? That's exactly right.
Why not? So this next portion is about like people who desire to get married, like who have a desire to find a spouse and, eventually be married. How during these seasons of life, how do you be content in that season whenever you desire marriage and desire a wife or a husband?
Okay. I'm really excited about this one. I think just being content in that is, one, surrendering it to the Lord every single day and saying, Lord, like, I laid this desire at your feet, and then not going and picking it back up and just leaving it there. But I think it's just, yes, important, again, to lay that at the feet of the Lord. And there are going to be some days that are harder than others. Because I remember, being in college and, being at TCC for as long as I was, there wasn't a lot of people getting married around me or anything. But I know...
not like a UCO.
But I know that it can be a struggle sometimes to... even, whenever I was in college, I had, friends dating. And I remember, some days I'd be like, oh, yeah, guys, I'm having the best day. And then the next day, I see, my friend and, her boyfriend. And then I'm like, well, now I'm sad. Because I don't have that. There are going to be days that are harder than other days, and those are the days that you really need to come and be like, Lord, like I give this over to you.
Yeah.
But I also think, I mean, there's just so many things you can do while you're single. Like, I mean, you can go overseas. You can, I mean, be involved in your campus ministry and your church's ministry. You can serve. You can, I mean, do the things that married people can do. I mean, Tyson and Kyle just talked about it. Like, they have someone else to consider now when they're doing these things. Whereas, I mean, when you're single, like, again, you have the summer to go overseas. You have the summer to go work at Falls Creek or go serve somewhere. And I think just also a super big aspect of being content in your singleness is being surrounded by godly community. And we said this like a few weeks ago on the podcast, but I mean, girls hang out with other godly women. Guys, go hang out with other godly guys and build a foundation and build that community. Because I remember, like, even me being at TCC and just being surrounded by, I mean, the women that I surrounded myself with there, like, I mean, they spurred me on to, I mean, memorize scripture, to pray for the nations, to, they spurred me on to go overseas, but it didn't happen because of COVID. But, I mean, they helped cultivate my heart, to be a heart for the nations and to be a heart that chases after God's own heart because of the people I surrounded myself with. That, I mean, it's just such a blessing to be surrounded by a godly community in that way, and just doing life with people in that way. And it also kind of helps not focus on, oh my gosh, like, does this guy like me? Does this guy not? Because, like, I'm surrounding myself with these women that I get to spend my life just, I mean, doing life with them, and not focusing on other things. So
yeah, and something to go along with that, like what you were talking about a little bit earlier, of like, you know, seeing people who have relationships whenever you are single. And I think removing extracurricular things that you do not need that cause comparison within your heart towards other people. Removing those things is a big thing of contentment, finding contentment. Something that happened to me about 4 weeks ago is I was looking through Instagram, and I go through periods to where, like, I delete Instagram for about a week or two, then I get it back for a day or a couple days, and I was just scrolling through, and I saw about 5 posts in a row of people just getting engaged. And I was like, well, this isn't good for me. And I deleted Instagram because I didn't need it. And, like, that's something that caused comparison within my heart towards other people. And I was like, they have these things. They have another person. They're getting engaged. They're about to be married. And I knew that, like, immediately. I was like, okay, well, there's so much comparison in my heart. I don't need this. And you just, you can delete Instagram. You can delete things that cause those comparison things, those comparison feelings whenever, especially you don't need Instagram or, like, those extracurricular things. So
I think it's a good, as Chris kind of mentioned, like, it's okay if you're a guy to hang out with your guy friends and the ladies. Like, you guys can all hang out in a giant group together, and guess what that can do? That could also help you, like, meet some people without being like asking somebody on a date, right? Like, because there can be red flags of somebody, like, oh, hey, we wouldn't work, like, and I'm not going to ask that person out on a date, like, and I'm glad I found that out, like,
fan, and I just can't do it.
as like, you hang out in groups, right? Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I think when I got to OSU, it was like, I'd be accused of flirting just because I asked, how's your week been? Like, it's just kind of like, that was a different culture, different time. But it was one of those things to where it's like, you can hang out in groups together and be able to, like, get to know each other and be like, oh man, that person's really cool. Another thing that I think is really important that we haven't really touched on is, like, God knows the desires of your heart. Be praying. Like, invest time in praying for those things. Like, pray for the people that you see, like, getting engaged, like, being like, okay, Lord, like, I praise you for that. Like, I'm glad that they have that. Like, I want to pray that they have a marriage that is firmly founded on you, and it will last and be a light of what godly marriages should look like. Lord, I desire that. So I want to pray for my future spouse. You know, I want to pray for my future wife. I want to pray for my future husband, like whomever that may be, like that we are coming to a place where like we are content in you. And then as we start dating, like that contentment in you continues to grow and grow and grow. Like pray for those things, like invest time, take out time to pray for that person, to pray for you in that situation and in those circumstances, like, because it's extremely important, right? Like God knows he's not just sitting here saying like, oh, you desire that? Well, suck it up. Like, sorry about you. Like you're going to be single for the rest of your life. I mean, the people that I remember in college, like I had some buddies that, I don't know if I wouldn't say broken up with, but the dates stopped. Mainly because the excuse would be like, I feel like I might be called to singleness. Those people that happened, like they said that, like are now married with kids. Like, you know, so it's like we go through this to where we think like in this present time of me being single, like I am called to a lifetime of singleness, when it's like, we don't know that. Like we don't. I mean, some people may know that for sure. Like you may have a very firm calling in that. And if that's the case for you, like amen. Like that's what God's called you to. But right now, I mean, as you're single, you are called to singleness. Like that doesn't mean it's a lifetime thing. It could just be a period of time thing. Or maybe, you kind of alluded to, Riley, like if your mind is wrapped up fully and just being like, oh, I'm discontent. I need a date. I need to have somebody. I can't be alone. That's a very telltale sign of you shouldn't date, because you are bringing this person into your life to meet your needs, not to come together for the sake of Christ. It's saying, hey, I'm going to bring you in, like, and it's very selfish in that, to where if you get married, like, I'm not saying again that it can't become God glorifying, but you could have a very me-centered marriage. Hey, you're here to meet my needs and those things, and it is very dangerous. And so we have to be on guard against that, to where we desperately need accountability. And in dating, in our singleness, in marriage, accountability is something we need in all of those stages, to make sure our heart and mind is focused on the Lord, and it continues to be focused on the right thing.
Yeah. I also think.
Sorry, Tyson was Tyson's been waiting for a while to say something.
Patient.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's too late. Riley already screwed it up.
Okay. Just another thing that I was thinking about, just practically, and how to be content in our singleness. A lot of times, talk to girls and they're like, man, like, I just really wish I was dating somebody, like all these things. And something I asked them, I asked them, okay, what music are you listening to right now? What movies are you watching? Because, it's so
just listening. Listening to all the singles about finding that significant other and watching those rom-coms.
A lot of times they're like, oh, like all I'm doing is like I'm listening
The Notebook on repeat
to Taylor Swift or Olivia Rodrigo or whatever, and I'm like, okay, well, let's change that, because your mind, like what you feed your mind is gonna, direct a lot of the things you think about, direct your steps and things like that. And if you're not filling your mind with, memorizing scripture or, listening to worship music, listening to a podcast, or just not listening to anything in the car and just, praying, and just focusing on those things. And I think that is just a super important aspect, is what are you filling your mind with? And even, like TV shows, like, there are like good TV shows out there, but a lot of them are centered around just relationships. And you can be sitting there and you can be like, man, like, I wish I had that. And then you start thinking about that and you're like, I got to find the one, I got to do these things, I got to be better. And it's like, you just got to go read your Bible. Like, you just, like, you don't have to focus on those things. But I think that's just important. Okay, Tyson.
Go for it.
So I want to shout out all those content people out there, my homies out there who are content in being single for this time, because I want to say that, I don't know why that's funny.
I'm just thinking of Riley is all I'm thinking of.
No. Don't.
I'm doing it.
Don't. And just like Kyle said, like, don't allow other people's paths to like control your relationship. Yeah. Like the same thing in singleness. Now I'll preface this to say that I was complicit in all of my wrongdoings, but like growing up, like I've always been content in being single, but through like friends and other like influences, like they implanted a desire to be with someone else when I knew darn well I didn't want to. And so I was still complicit in that. But like, understand, like, okay, like if you want to be single right now, like, don't care what other people say. You can be single, and that's perfectly fine. And there's no problem with that. If you're not seeking a relationship with anyone, continue to do it until you're ready. Don't let other people, mostly parents, dictate like your love life.
Yeah.
Like if you don't want to date, then don't date, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And more power to you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it's funny as we talk about like singleness and stuff. Like I was talking with a couple students yesterday, and they're like, "Well, Kyle, you kind of called this relationship like before it even happened." I was like, "Well, like I'm just somebody that'll like see things, you know, and then I don't ask those people. I don't bring them into the conversation, but I'll ask a different group of people that know those people, and I'll be like, hey guys, so how are we feeling about these two people? Like if they're to start dating, like how are we feeling about that? Like, and then I'm like, now don't say anything to them because we don't want to like force anything to happen, but I'm just curious. And so I think it's very similar. Like, hey, it's okay. Like if you see some things, be like, oh man, like I think like this person would be really good for this person. It's okay to think that. You don't have to direct it, right? Just, hey, have the thought. You might bring in a couple trusted people if you want.
I'm Cupid.
That's right. You don't have to be the one driving the ship, you know? Like, but anyway.
I'm convinced that part of Kyle's job is just setting up people.
What is it? It was in the Jewish community. They're called a matchmaker.
I think
Yeah.
is that it?
Matchmaker,
Yeah, it's
matchmaker,
Baptist couple making, right?
Baptist couple making. That's
yeah,
right.
He's the
That's
director
right.
of that.
Yeah, and I usually just use one sentence to do it, like with Micah. Hey, she's single.
I think another thing, and I don't know if my phone is going to load, but I have this quote, and I don't know if it's going to load, but there's a book called Not Yet Married, and I read it while I was single. Actually, Owen Bassam told me about this book. Yeah, it was a fun time. And he,
awesome.
he's great. It was funny because it was my freshman year of TCC. I'll never forget this. I was in Tito's minivan, and it was me, Tito, Owen, and some other people. We were on our way to Chick-fil-A, and we're like driving, and all of a sudden, Owen is sitting in the passenger's seat, and he like turns down the music, and he was like, "Guys, I have to read this quote to you that I just read in this book." And we were like, "Why are you reading?" Like we're all like, like having a good time. But it made sense. Right. I didn't know Owen at the time, but I was like, okay, it makes sense now. But it was this book called Not Yet Married: The Pursuit of Joy and Singleness and Dating. And in it, he just read this quote, and basically the guy was like, hey, as a single person, like your greatest gift is your yes. Like, yes to going to getting that early morning cup of coffee, or yes to helping somebody move in somewhere, or yes to being able to take someone to the airport, or literally whatever, because you can make the decisions to be selfish with your time because you don't have anyone else's feelings to consider. And I remember him saying that like my freshman year as a college student, and I was like, I want that to be the basis of a lot of my ministry. And that was just, and then I eventually read the book, and that, I mean, it changed my perspective just in being like, hey, like I want to use my college years. I want to use this time until I get married. If I'm at that time thinking like, if I were to get married, like I just want to use this time up to now to just give people my yes. In the sense of, hey, I'm doing this so that the Lord is glorified, and I am making myself available to you for the advancement of the gospel.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
it's just one quick story, and then I'm done. But when Nikki and I were dating, so I was started seminary, and I was taking this like family life course or whatever, and I had to read a couple books, and one of them was called Redeeming Singleness. And then the other one was When Sinners Say I Do. If you're engaged, you're going to get married, I encourage you to read When Sinners Say I Do. But I was reading this book, Redeeming Singleness, and Nikki would only see me like reading this book, to where in our dating, she's like sitting there, she's like, is Kyle like wrestling with being called to singleness? Like while I'm dating her, she's like, is he like wrestling with this idea of like, am I called to singleness? It was really funny. I had to read the book for class, so, but she didn't like put those two things together.
She's silently freaking out.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Wait a minute. But we're continuing to go on dates and get serious? Like, but what if you just, hey, I'm called to singleness. Sorry about you. Like, see you later.
Too bad. Oh wow. No, I think that's really good. Do you guys have anything to add before we kind of close up?
No.
Well, I actually was gonna. I thought you were gonna say something that time I waited.
Krista has everything to add because the next time she talks about singleness, she'll probably be married.
Oh, you're right. Wow.
She's like freaking out.
Wow.
Krista, you only
Wow.
have like
I know. Well, I just really wanted to say, like, again, you have this time, so just don't waste it. And give this time. I mean, yes, like I said earlier, like, give that desire to the Lord, but also give that time to the Lord and be like, Lord, show me how to use this time for the maximum opportunity to advance your kingdom, and to, build biblical foundations within my heart and my lifestyle. And ask him again, just be like, Lord, I give you my time. Show me how to use it, how you would want me to use it. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks for the advice, guys. That was good.
Don't forget, Krista's still single, just so you know.
You're right. Yes.
time's ticking though.
Time is ticking.
Time is ticking.
Time is ticking. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Anything else, guys? Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Be sure to tune in next week where we'll be having another awesome discussion. And if you want more information or want to ask us a question, make sure to follow us on Instagram at UCOBCM.